Program 2, we start to get into the substantive material of the workshops, and we start to address some examples in more detail. I begin by presenting an overview of group culture. What I'm really suggesting is right from the beginning, a hidden group is created in the classroom. As students bring the norms, taboos, the rules, the various roles from the outside culture into that classroom and create a culture, sometimes a culture that can be an obstacle for work. However, with the help of the instructor, the culture can become an enhancement of the work and enhance the learning and dealing with the content. I asked the participants to do an exercise in order to try to illustrate what needs to be done in a class when we're going to deal with a sensitive topic. I know the example we're going to use in this class has to do with an openly lesbian instructor being attacked by an openly lesbian student. And so to illustrate a kind of approach to creating a positive atmosphere, I will be asking the workshop participants to discuss what would make it hard for us to have this conversation, but also what needs to be done to make it easier. This is going to lead to a discussion of the example in which we try to explore the meaning of the student's anger towards her instructor. A major emerging theme in this workshop, and reappears over and over again, is the importance of spontaneity and risk-taking. As you'll see in this session and many of them, when I asked the instructor what they felt like saying, what they would have liked to have said, if they only were not spending so much time censoring themselves, what comes out is often exactly the right thing to say and do. Participants also have a discussion, very appropriate, of some of the fears they have about taking risks and being spontaneous. For example, if they make a mistake and people complain, they get bad evaluations, will they be asked to teach again? How will it affect their obtaining tenure? All of these issues I've heard over and over again and over the years in these workshops, making it clear to me that senior faculty administrators have to create conditions where people feel safe to take a risk and to learn from mistakes. We'll continue the discussion of the authority theme in this particular tape, and I'll present a model in which I try to help the participants reject the false dichotomy between process and content by searching for the connections between the two. The session also provides an illustration of the power of going from the general to the specific, as the faculty member shares her example, and I encourage her to give us details about the actual conversations in the class. It becomes clear that a general discussion comes alive when you get into the specifics of the interactions. So maybe I take a minute, put it in context, all right? And some of this I shared last year. I just don't remember what I said last year and what I did, but I'll say it again. Maybe I'll do a better job this year. But I actually see your class group, and I see it using what I call an organismic model. And again, that's not an easy thing to say. Try it. I embarrassed myself to accomplish it. It hasn't come out right. I got it right this time. But essentially, if you go back into how people think about groups, which a class group is,
it can be quite organismic.
Just work on it. You'll get it. It'll just flow. Yeah, it will. But the models for a long time were mechanistic. You know, you would talk about an organization, agency, workplace, groups as having input, throughput, output. They weren't alive. And then a revolution came, and suddenly we started thinking about groups and organisms as an organism. And the quality of an organism compared to a machine is that it can grow, it can change, it's in constant interaction with its environment. So a while back, in my own training, I began to think about my groups as actually being a living organism, and that they get created when my students come together. I have a group work class I've just seen right now. I have about 20 students in it. Each one brings from the outside culture certain attitudes, values, beliefs. Norms, I put some up there, taboo subjects, etc. And I have to assume at the beginning of the class that culture gets created by this organism that I call the group as a whole. So when it starts with a culture, but a culture that may not be one that is positive for the kind of work we do. If, for example, everybody feels it is taboo to talk about race or sexual orientation, they're going to be careful about that, we're not going to create a culture in the class which changes those norms and changes those taboos. And I'm suggesting no matter what class you're in, you could be teaching research, doesn't matter. If the culture is you don't admit you're feeling overwhelmed, and unable to deal with statistics, then people aren't going to share that, and the tremendous benefit that comes from all in the same boat isn't going to exist. Because the culture is one where people are afraid to risk that they don't feel knowledgeable or they don't know something. So I, for years, have taken the position, one of my jobs as a teacher is to influence the culture for work, which means I have to address the norms, taboos, roles that people play, rules, etc. And I have to see my class, so I have it up there, which puts me on the edge. I'm half in and I'm half out. I'm part of the class, but I'm really not because I'm the instructor. But if you see the arrows, I'm being affected by what's going on in the class. I'm affecting what's going on in the class. The interactions of every member of the class is affecting what's happening. And once you shift that way, which, by the way, many of you probably, or most, developed as your concept of practice. Work with a family. We don't think of families as 5 individuals anymore. We know families are dynamic systems. We know a kid acts out in school, and 9 times out of 10 we find there's a family issue. The kid is sending a message. That's his role, even though the parents see him as the identified patient. And so we think that way, and we think that way about our group practice. I'm suggesting let's also think that way about our class. And if we start thinking about class using what we understand about groups as organisms, it changes dramatically, how we're going to approach it. So when we deal with taboo issues like sexual orientation, race, abortion, etc., we have to do some thinking about what the culture of that class is going to be when we start. And what, if anything, we can do, and what techniques or strategies we can use to change that culture, at least for the life of the class. I want to make that clear. I'm not trying to change people's... They can go out and... taboos have good uses, right? When I go to a party and I say to somebody I've just met, etc., how you doing? If they say not so well, my wife and I aren't getting along too well, but that's not the norm. You know what I mean? And so when I go to parties, I'd really rather have people respect that norm. Or I'm not going to get into the sexual stuff. I'm on tape, so I'm going to skip that. But you understand what I mean. So I'm not asking students for the rest of their life, although for their practice they have to change. They've got to be able to deal with things that we don't deal with. But for this class, for the 14 weeks, let's try to create a culture. You have to help where we can deal with stuff in a respectful manner, in a comfortable manner, where we can say things that we don't even think social work, quote, agrees with. Am I making some sense on that? So that shifts a lot about what we're doing. Go ahead, Rebecca.
One of the questions I have is the class that I'm teaching has, I think right now, enrolled 28 students. And how does that affect the culture of the group? Because I'm thinking the bigger the size, certainly the more difficult it is to feel like a group.
Well,
it's more like a community or something. And so it's difficult in some ways to get to know the individuals that make up that group.
Absolutely. And there'll be people who will never really get actively involved because there's not enough space in 14 weeks. You raised this issue too. I have it down. I didn't lose it. Structural issues. Rebecca, family collaboration in class. We want you to lecture. Students at a door knock. Remember saying we want you to lecture. Robin raised small class, big lecture hall. So obviously size is going to make a difference. What I think is the answer to most of these problems is a recognition that it's not just your problem. It's their problem as well. That's a big shift in thinking. So on any of these issues, I'm going to be arguing you're on the right step if what you're saying is, for example, there's 28 people in this room. And I think you've all noticed it's a big class. It's going to be hard for us to get to know each other. It's going to be hard for us, for everyone to find space to speak up. Let's just take a few minutes to talk about how do we make a class of 28 feel close enough and intimate enough so that people feel really involved. You understand what I just did?
Yep.
I took Rebecca's question and I made it an issue for me and the students. If Robin was here, it would be the same. This room is not a great room for small group discussions. We're sitting up in tears, Let's talk for a few minutes about what we can do to try to get more of a feeling that this is a class group and not just people sitting in rows listening to a lecture. You've shifted dramatically the culture of the group already. What you're saying is, as the instructor, you're not the only one responsible for this issue. And you want the group members to get involved. Am I making sense on that? We can come back to that on a number of issues. I'd like to stay with the one that we raised. But yes, I literally have had a group, I think I mentioned it last week, of 1,200 field instructors from all the schools of social work in New York, in NYU auditorium with 300 in the balcony and 900 sitting down in the audience. And I said, pretend you're a small group. And I'm telling you, by the end of that session, it felt like a small group. Now, not everybody got in, but everybody heard, everybody was impacted, the things we talked about were meaningful to them, and it felt like a small group, even though there were 1,200 people. I mean, even I was amazed when that happened, because I've had large groups, but not 1,200. So part of the problem is our belief it can happen. If we start by believing it can happen, that we can treat even a large group as if it's a smaller group, the only issue then becomes how do we and our class members do it.
Right.
Am I making sense?
They expect miracles.
That's part of the culture.
Yeah.
Right. I just don't have to perform.
Am I making some sense on the framework at least?
She
All right.
said she doesn't have to perform the miracles. She just has
That's
to
exactly right. You don't have to perform the miracles.
Just expect them.
I
Let's look up.
I have found, and I'll bet you everyone in this room has found incredible strength that people have to be able to overcome obstacles and do things which we would have thought they could never do, but they need someone to help them. So let's get to the issues that are the diversity course. Got a lot of feedback. Robin, I'll have to skip. Diane, your example, which I think raises authority theme issues as well as other issues. Jennifer's not here, so we'll have to save that for another time. But Melissa, maybe that abortion question, a hot topic. How do we start to deal with it? I'd like to model something with us right here. We are about ourselves to discuss difficult issues. What's the culture in this group? Are we going to feel comfortable? We had examples already where people don't always feel comfortable. Where we have to work on our culture so that our culture becomes a place. One of the things that I found helpful, and I think I'll do it right now, just to model it, is when I know I'm going to go into an area that's difficult, or it's coming up, or it has come up, and that I know the culture of the group is such that they're going to have some difficulty, I often will ask them to address it. So I'll say things like, and I'll do it right now, what makes it hard for us to talk about inter and intra-ethnic issues dealing with sexual orientation? What makes it difficult for us to have a conversation around abortion or race or one of these other issues? And also, what would make it easier? I'm asking two questions. What makes it hard and what makes it easier? Why don't we have a little bit of a conversation right here on those two things? Why is it so hard to talk about these things?
No matter what, you're probably going to offend somebody.
You're afraid of offending people. And so there's a tendency to want to walk on eggshells or not say anything at all. What else? I think that's a good start. I'm role-playing right now, but I'm not role-playing because it's real. Diane.
Well, I think some of my students feel afraid of getting a bad grade because they may disagree with me. I also think they're afraid of being disapproved of by me or other students.
So in a class situation, unless the culture is established, which has a norm, which suggests that people who speak up and say even unpopular things, or are willing to confront the instructor around a difficult issue, or each other, unless you change that culture, people aren't going to speak up. So one of our jobs is, how do we change that culture? Others. What makes it so hard? And also, what's made it easier? We've all had experiences when it's been easier. What was it about those experiences that made it easier?
Well, I think that one of the twofold is one of the things that makes it difficult is that many of these issues are value related, and they're not necessarily things that we can separate ourselves from. And so I think that makes it difficult because they're tied to a lot of different things. And I think what makes it easier is in some ways, and I don't know how to articulate this necessarily in words, is that when you're in a group, you kind of have a sense. There's an atmosphere or an attitude that you can sense from the group members. Maybe it's body language that lets you know it's like you're safe here.
It's accepted.
Right.
That you'll be accepted here. So one of the things we have to do, if this was a class, one of the things we have to do is try to find ways to create that atmosphere so that people do feel safe for each other. Yeah. Christine,
I think for me that my past experiences have both made it more difficult and make it easier at the same time. So if I've had negative experiences in one area, then I'm going to expect that. And if I've had positive experiences in one area, then I'm going to expect that. So I feel like I'm set myself up sometimes for those expectations.
For example, like a negative that would make it...
Okay, so maybe around religion. I went to Catholic school growing up. There was what I found to be a lot of hypocrisy going on, a lot of time with me in the corner kneeling on beans saying prayers to make up for things I've said. And then, so that's my religion in my head. That's what happens. And then,
Christine, could you go to that corner, please?
Exactly. And say a couple Hail Marys, and when you're done, you can come back to the group.
Right.
I have ice chips.
Ice chips. Oh.
They used to make you kneel on dried beans. It was very painful.
So it wasn't just the culture; it was specific experiences people have had that have been painful. That they bring into that class group.
Yet at the same time, later on in life, I've had very positive experiences that I tend to form really close relationships with very religious people, which that also surprises me all the time. So I come from it at both places, and I wind up just very confused in general.
So if you come into this class, even a second-year class, because you don't know what kind of place this is going to be.
Right.
Is it going to be the kind where I got to kneel on sit, or is it going to be the kind where I feel accepted in it? Am I making some sense? That's what the students bring into the class, and they don't know. They don't know you, the instructor, and they don't know the peers. They may have come out of first-year classes, which they had very bad experiences. A class on impression that they felt was oppressive. A place where they expressed views and took a risk. But the instructor, for one reason or another, indicated to them that wasn't appropriate to say. So now they're coming into your class loaded. No wonder it's hard. But you know what happens? I'm going to stop this now. I don't want to get to the examples. By my asking you to talk about what makes it hard and what makes it easier, we're talking about it. You're talking about the very thing. The class is now talking about the very thing they thought was hard to talk about because they're talking about what makes it hard. As they talk about what makes it hard, that's the process. They're into the content. And that very conversation is changing the culture of the group. We're asking them. So the instructor has to say, as I have to say, we won't always be able to do it. We're going to slip. There'll be times where we'll say things that may be offensive. It's very important that if someone's feeling offended, they find a way to say it. Rather than just walking out and feeling upset about it. We've had our own example right here, which I think changed our culture. I think so. I went home and did a lot of thinking. So there was an example right here where our culture, without going into it, changed because of people taking a risk. So I've got it. My job as the instructor is to help all you guys feel free to take that risk and feel safe. That's one of my important jobs as an instructor. And we'll monitor it. And if I do anything that makes it difficult for you, please let me know. Now maybe it's going to take a while before you know I really mean that. So try me on easy ones. I usually would tell try me on some easy ones, safe ones, and see how I handle those. And if I handle those, let's just stop for a minute. I tried to do it as a kind of a role play, but I wanted you to get a sense. There are things that didn't come up in this group, and maybe for good reasons. When I do this in a workshop, for example, or a class, I have African American people. They'll say, I'm tired of people asking me what my people think. And there's one African American student in the class. They're often the only one. I'm tired of that. And when I ask, what would make it easier to have those conversations if I thought they really wanted to listen? So the important thing is not that they're asking, but that you're feeling that they wanted to listen. What else would make it easier? And they will say, I think they got to do a little work on their own. I'd like to see people in my class who are interested in the subject taking some initiative and not just depending on me. You understand how that conversation starts to set expectations and new norms dramatically. I can't tell you how amazed I've been at how a workshop of 200 professionals that would never touch issues, as soon as they have that conversation for about 10, 15 minutes, they're off and running. And people, by the very conversation, feel safer. So I don't start an area anymore that I know is going to be raising these kinds of issues without having the conversation with the class first. What's your thoughts? I'm giving you another job. I'm saying not only do you have to worry about your content, not only do you have to watch the clock, but you have to see this organism that you can't see. You can't see the class as a whole, right? You can't see norms, taboos, It's not like there's a light up there as you walk into your classroom and it says, sex, taboo, we won't talk about that. You infer it because you see week after week when someone gets close to talking about a particularly difficult issue, someone changes the subject. They have trouble. That when you ask them to comment on a social policy issue that has race connection to it, you get silence in the class. So the behavior of the class is how you infer the group as a whole and the culture. It's not written on the wall, but it's almost like it could be. Once that's clear to you, it's amazing. You know what happens? You see things you wouldn't have seen before. You suddenly see this class has this taboo subject or this norm, and I will have to address this if I'm going to get some real learning in this area. And I'll have to address it in a supportive way. I can't be angry at them for having it, for God's sakes. I usually will share one of the things people will usually say, one more comment and then Diane jump in. They'll often say, I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing, people will think I'm a racist, I'm homophobic, etc. So I've taken to telling people the story about my, and again, if I said it last year, my apologies, when I did some volunteer work at AIDS Action, I told you this last year, and so I think self-disclosure often goes a long way to helping. Humor.
I mean, you think about funny thing happened to me.
And pain. You have to share painful stuff. I have found that is helpful to be honest about stuff like that. Again, please forgive me. I don't remember about the guy who came into my workshop when we had the air conditioning problem. Oh, this is the worst. This is the worst. I'm doing did I say that?
Well, I think I heard you tell that story.
Friday and a Saturday workshop.
No, I read it in an article.
I may have written it up. I think I put it in there, which took a lot of guts on my part. I'm doing a workshop on a Friday and Saturday, and the issue is group work and diversity. Right, that's the issue. Interethnic, and the air conditioning is terrible on Friday, and I'm complaining like crazy, but I can't turn it up, can't turn it down. Everybody comes in Saturday. We're all dressed informally. There's about 150 people in the group, so I don't know everyone, and an African-American guy with a baseball cap walks in with a T-shirt. And I said, I'm glad you're here. The thermostat's over there. He said, well, you probably don't recognize me, but I'm not the maintenance man. I'm one of the participants. I'm just late. I said, oh. Sweat starts to run. And I swear to you, this is a workshop on diversity. I'm putting my head down. And I'm trying to teach this as if this didn't happen, This is only a few years ago. And I'm going to keep going, but out of the corner of my eye, I see 4 black women sitting in the first row looking like this, waiting to say it. Until I find I can't do it anymore. I just can't do it. And I say to them, wait a minute, I got to go back to that. First of all, I have to apologize. Here I'm teaching a session on diversity, interethnic work, and you come in, and I see a black man coming in with a baseball cap, and I assume you're a maintenance man. Now, I have to think about why I did that. But what I think is more important is I've been trying to tough out the last 45 minutes as if it didn't happen. And then the whole discussion takes off. And all these 4 women, they all look at each other laughing. He said, we were waiting to see if you were going to say something. But to me, that opened up the conversation in a way that it would never opened up. And believe me, that was a hard one. And believe me, Diane, I thought long and hard before I put it in that article.
It was great.
But I thought it was important.
Yeah.
So does that help a little with setting the stage? Diane, you were going to jump in before.
Oh, no, what I was going to say isn't important, but just one more thing on that. I mean, I think that also, I know that when I am teaching human diversity or diversity and oppression, I really do think, and why I love that example is I really do think it's important also for those of us who are white to model making mistakes or to share about mistakes that we've made, especially for other white students. For white students, so that they will then, I think it just helps them feel a little freer about taking more risks in the classroom.
And it also,
so that's why I love that.
Well, it also recognizes, as I try to say to my students now, you can't grow up in the United States.
Right.
Can't grow up in the communities I grew up in without having internalized sexism, racism, homophobia. It's there. The question is, what are the subtle and not so subtle ways it comes out, and how do we monitor it? Yeah. That's the job. And as soon as you say that, people don't feel as much like they got to walk on eggshells, because there's going to be an acceptance of the fact that they're bringing attitudes and values in, and they're working on them. They're actually working on them. Rebecca.
I had an experience actually in the HBSE course. One of the major topics in that course is an abortion controversy.
Yes.
And so I knew it was going to be, I shouldn't say, I didn't know if it would be a heated topic as far as it would come out that way, but I knew that people would have strong feelings internally anyway. So I told them a story about when I was first out of the field as a bachelor social worker. I was working in Boston, Massachusetts at the Department of Social Services. And I had a client who was a teenager, an older teenager, who was pregnant and who decided she wanted an abortion. Well, I had just graduated from a very conservative Christian school.
Which we don't want to stereotype.
But right. But I will let you know that abortion was a taboo, and it was not okay. It was very pro-life. And I remember saying, oh no, what am I going to do? And I shared the story with the students. I said, and it was one of the best lessons for me as a social worker to really put my social work skills to action and be aware of my personal feelings about the topic, and to be able to support her and look at the alternatives, talk about the pros and cons of those alternatives, and ended up driving her to a clinic and waiting for her as my car had things thrown at it and big signs were in my face, and I shared that story with the students, and I was taking a risk. I had never really kind of gone out there on a limb like that with them, with students in a class, and what it did is I had several students, when we did a role play about a similar situation, raising their hands and saying, I don't know how to keep my bias out of this.
Wonderful.
And it was like the most powerful.
Wonderful.
So it was a good thing.
And that's the topic. That's the topic for the class.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a great. This woman, she goes, I just wanted to keep telling her, keep the baby.
We have in the text script that the first year students are using, mine. There are CDs in there now that Denise and Mark made with Steve's help. And there's a wonderful role play. Steve, who's the one who does it?
Janine Hunt.
Janine Hunt. She does a wonderful role play, and she shows the blooper also. The blooper being how she's going to help this woman realize that she doesn't really need an abortion. And it's a wonderful blooper. But then she does the practice where she has those attitudes, but she's very clear that it's not her job to impose those. And if she's in an agency or a setting or personally having difficulty, she has a responsibility to help that client find a place where she can't get the help. And it's a wonderful example that touches on that. First year students are getting it. It's packed right in the book. Hopefully it'll help them start to address it. So how does this relate? Since that was one of the topics, Melissa, let's jump on it. The advocacy, policy, and the abortion in the class. Tell us a little bit more about that. And then, Diane, we'll do the one that you raised. We'll get at least those two in today. Go ahead.
I think it's just, again, like I mentioned last week, our professional organization sort of outlines these standards, I guess you would call them, as to what they think that we should follow. And so when these two students were having a discussion,
in a class on social policy?
It was a policy discussion.
And was it around the issue of abortion, or was that?
Yeah, it was on abortion, and one student was saying, I am pro-life, and I will not. I don't remember exactly what he was saying, but he was saying, I have a big problem counseling this person toward choice. Or, I guess I don't know how to, toward...
Yeah, it's probably close enough. Yeah.
So, the other student said, well, you're a social worker. You have to believe that, in so many words. And I was feeling really uncomfortable because I'm thinking, how do I intervene? What do I say? Are we supposed to believe something or not? Does school want me to say something? What do I do? And I let them go. And at the end of the semester, they said that they felt like it was one of the rare instances at the school where they felt like they could say what they wanted. And I was like, all right, so maybe I did the right thing. But I don't know, because how do you teach exactly like you said, Rebecca. How do you can't teach values. I mean, values are a personal thing.
But what's so interesting, Melissa, you're teaching a class, this thing comes up, you're having a whole set of reactions, none of which you share. Now think about it for a second. What if you had said to the class right at the moment what you just told us? What would you be saying to them? And let's watch how the process of your being honest and disclosing your struggle actually takes the content of the class further. Understand what I'm arguing? What would you have said to the class if you just said what you said to us? If you just was spontaneous and you weren't busy thinking, what am I supposed to say? But just put out your dilemma. What would it have sounded like?
I don't know what to say.
I don't know what to say. Keep going. You said a lot more to us.
I don't know what to say. As social workers, perhaps we are taught to advocate for certain issues or ways of thinking, and
stop thinking.
Yeah.
Stop thinking. I liked it better the first time. What was it about the first time that you? I liked it the first time.
Feelings.
I feel the feelings. I'm a little lost. This is a tough thing to intervene. I don't want to cut off this conversation. Sometimes I wonder, does the school have a position I'm supposed to take? Yeah. That's all what you were thinking. Feeling at the moment, and people tell us, our National Association tells us we're supposed to have some values, but is that right? Should a National Association tell us what we believe? Those were all right there. So what stops us, instructors? You understand? That was right there. I think it would have been a wonderful discussion, not about abortion, but the larger issue, about the ability to have different points of view. What happens if you disagree with your professional association? Do you have to take a political position because your association feels that? What if you're in an agency and you have that conflict? Certainly, the guy who said to him, well, you can't feel that way if you're a social worker, was expressing a point of view that needs to be confronted. Understand? And I can't tell you how often it strikes me that if I ask the instructor, what would you feel like saying right at that moment? Right on target. So what stops you? I mean, not just you. You understand what I'm saying? What stops you? Because there are powerful factors that make you go through all of that, cautious thinking. You were good not to cut it off. They had a good discussion and debate. That's great. Now, how can I take it a step further next time I face it and it comes up? What stops us?
I just want to say that because it kind of fits with this, the issue I brought up last week about my concerns about was I inundating the students with diversity issues and scaring them away from being social workers. And based on what I learned in here last year, like the next morning it all kind of came flooding back to me about doing exactly that. I just went into the class and did exactly that. These are my concerns. I'm wondering how you're feeling. I'm really anxious because you're not, you don't give me any feedback. I don't know what this all means.
And I'm worried about flooding you with this stuff.
Yeah, and I'm worried, that I'm overwhelming you, that you're going to leave social work, or that it's too much, or I need you to tell me something. And so I did that. I really pleaded with them to take my sincerity that they were safe to disagree with me. I welcomed that because it was helpful to me to see a different facet of something that I look at a certain way. So I did all that. I used my clinical skills that you told me about 100 times last year to continue to use. And it was a wonderful experience.
Oh, that's great.
It was wonderful. First of all, they dumped all this stuff on me about how they were overwhelmed.
Right.
And so I got to address that with them in the next couple of classes. And then they talked about how the diversity stuff was really making them think about themselves in a different way in some ways that they really were surprised at and didn't like themselves too much about.
Which is exactly what needs to be discussed.
It was, and I have them for 2 classes right in a row, the same group. It's kind of a weird setup. But we continued it through both classes. It was the best. It was the best. So I just want to say that's a living experience of doing exactly what Larry says, and I did it last year too. But I don't know, somehow I forgot this year. But it. Well,
I think Elaine, you caught it quicker.
Yeah, I did.
You caught it quicker.
I did.
Since you caught it quicker, she did it the next day. Where last year it took a little while to even put it on the table,
Yeah.
the issue, because you weren't sure about the culture in this group. Understand? You weren't sure that it was safe to share something like that, and yet you did. You got the help, and then boom, that helped. What about this, Melissa? Is this making sense to you in terms of that class? You still have that class?
Pardon?
You still have that
No,
class?
it was 2 summers ago. But I'll go back to teaching it, I think, in the summer. As instructors, I'm a perfectionistic type A personality anyway, and so when I teach, it's the same thing. I mean, I'm like so prepared. The first time I taught, I didn't do anything but prepare. I mean, that's all I did. So it was, you think you have to be perfect and always have the answer. And that to me would probably make so much sense, and I would do it, but I would never think to do it on my own. It would take discussing it.
So it's risky.
You have to give answers.
Right. It's risky for you. You're not sure whether this is the appropriate way. A lot of people have been taught in social work. They've spent a lot of time thinking before you say anything to a client, which of course kills the work with the client, rather than spontaneity, that allows you to trust your feelings. So there's a way of thinking that I think I was trained, certainly, that trained me out of my spontaneity. And the best part about it is learning that it's okay to be spontaneous. How about they'll never let me teach a course again if I make a mistake? Is that one of the factors too? I need some support. What if students complain because I said it wrong? Am I going to get tenure if I'm on a tenure track and people say, do you know what she said in the class? So I think there's a lot of fear, and you need to feel supported in your setting by not just a workshop like this, but by people who deal with you, who say this is the way you're going to learn. Take a risk. You'll learn from a mistake. You'll never learn from passivity. You'll learn from active mistakes. So part of the job of the school should be to create the culture where you feel safe to do that. Do you? Okay.
There's a myth, at least it's a myth to me too, that if you look back in your history as to what you think of teachers, right from preschool on up, at least I was raised in a family that admired teachers and thought they knew everything. And if we take that on, to me that's a persona that's not really authentic, then we have to live up to those expectations we're putting on ourselves. What I hear Larry saying is to let go of that and be vulnerable.
Right.
And self-disclose and use humor, which he does a lot.
But people do it without
try to
humor
do
too.
the circle thing rather than, the podium up here and the students down here, that we're in this together. I was in my classes saying that this is a wisdom circle, that we all have wisdom to share, especially in this field because so many people come back to school after they've been in the field, some of them 30 years. I'm very inhibited when I hear that. I think, oh my goodness, they've got to know more than me.
But they're tremendously relieved when they hear you say that. Because they know they're going to be respected.
Yes, very much so. Please share your wisdom. So as soon as you kind of get rid of some of those, I think they're myths, but we've all been raised with honoring teachers.
But also it's easier when you've been around a long time and made all the mistakes to say that. I got thrown into teaching a new course that I haven't taught here. It's Interventions 1. It's got 5 labs associated with it. I haven't done any of that before. I took someone else's syllabus. I said, well, what's the syllabus like? Now, they're using my bloody textbook. And yet, I felt anxious about this course. I have never felt so anxious. I was going home telling my wife, I said, what's going on here? It wasn't until I let go of that structure that I was handed and said, how do I accomplish that in a way that I feel comfortable, that I suddenly started to teach. And I would have to say I was dreading, going into that class. And yet I've taught 40 years, That's my practice area. I know the area very well, and yet I went back to that initial anxiety because it was the first time I was teaching it, and I thought I had to teach it a certain way. I had to teach someone else's syllabus. We talked about that last year. I went through all those experiences again until I stopped and said, what am I doing? For God's sakes. And I shared it with the class, and that was the turning point. I said, here's the guy who taught you textbook, and yet here's what I've been feeling coming into this class. Let's try to find another way to work. And that was the turning point for me and for them. I think we have the same problem as social workers as teachers, and that's where we have to relearn some of our practice, is that we want our students to be open, honest, vulnerable, and risky. And we're often the opposite, because we feel we're supposed to be perfect. So how do students learn to do that? I think they see us doing it. But again, I just want to make it clear. My experience with this new course reminded me that it's easy to say It's not that easy to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, even though I have tried some things at work, I've had a high anxiety level about this.
Yeah.
And I also had this temptation and feeling that I should know this stuff, and I should look like I know this stuff and be able to answer. And
Marsha, I'm going to ask to see if we can spend those last 10 minutes that we have on the thing Diane raised.
Oh, good.
Because I think that's important.
I think so too.
And it has to do now with the authority theme. I put up there. Did I put it up there?
Yes, you did.
Up there that you read at any one point in your class, you're either dealing with your content, policy, practice, you name it, research, statistics. That's the content, or you're dealing with process. And two elements of process in your class. One is the authority theme, the relation to the students to you. And the other is the intimacy theme, the relation to students to each other. Where it gets interesting is that often it's a false dichotomy between process and content. And you've already given a number of examples whereby the way you handled the authority theme or the intimacy theme, that's teaching the content of the course. Especially if at the end of that class you can point out there was a connection. Such as, look what happened here, in this class today. Can we take a few minutes to talk about it? I think what happened in this class is very important around the content of this class. And it sure as hell is. The fact that people have to deal with social policy and have trouble conflicting when their values, that conflict in the class, the process, intimacy thing, was directly related to the content of the class. And so dealing with process sometimes gets you into content, sometimes the other way around. The other part that's difficult is sometimes you think it's the intimacy theme, the students having trouble with each other, when it's really the authority theme. How many of you grew up with younger brothers or sisters? And when your parents got you really mad because they said or did something, who'd you take it out on? Your parents? No, you took it out on the brother or the sister, So sometimes what looks like an intimacy theme issue is really the result of an authority theme issue. You raised one last week. Well, you raised two, actually. The students who gave you the feedback that you felt very uncomfortable about, but you said both students who were attacking you and some of your ideas, who you felt were not gay, and students who were, as I remember it.
Yeah. Can I clarify?
Please do.
Actually, I wasn't uncomfortable at all about the feedback that they gave me about, it was when, what was that about? The mid-semester evaluation when, it was like a little bit of too touchy-feely over, we're doing too much touchy-feely stuff and not enough content. So they were raising issues of balance. I didn't feel actually like they were challenging my authority. I thought we had a good discussion about it. But the intra
was the issue.
Issues, it's like, and I don't know what else I can say about it. It's as a white professor, I'm very aware of dealing very explicitly with issues of racism in the class and making that safe. And then as a lesbian standing in front of students, I'm very aware of encouraging students who may have attitudes against homosexuality to feel comfortable to say those. So I sort of work extra hard at that.
Oh, right on top.
Because I think that just my presence as a lesbian might make them feel like they have to be quiet about that, which I, of course, don't want them to. But when, for example, when this young lesbian in a class that I was teaching started to, I guess what I would call act out at me.
In the class or outside?
Caught me off guard.
Was it in the class or outside?
In class sometimes.
Subtly in class?
Yeah, subtly, but I could, deal with that, and it was fun sometimes. But then I was getting these emails from her. I mean, she was like really angry about the assignment, she was angry about my feedback, she was angry about this, angry about that. I mean, and it just started to feel like, ooh, something's going on here.
Did you talk to her?
More than, yeah, we had a meeting.
Now, let me just point out that some of our teaching takes place out of the classroom.
Yeah.
And often following up with a student individually is one of the important parts of what we do. So you had a meeting.
But I still, and I thought, I did what I could in the meeting, and I
give us a little of it, Diane. Share a little of it. What did you say, and how'd you approach it?
I think I said things like, gee, I wanted to get together with you because, I'm glad that you sent me the emails that you did, and I'm thinking that you're really angry at me about something, and and I'm wondering if it's, you know, with the content of the class or with how we're interacting in the class, the feedback that I am giving you, if it is the assignment, if it's something else. You know, I'm wondering if there's something that I'm doing that's really bothering you. You know, so I tried to do that.
What did she say?
With her. If I remember correctly, I don't, you know, it felt very surface to me. Mm-hmm. Like she wasn't going to the place that where she wanted to touch what was really going on. And I think I remember ending that meeting feeling like, okay, we dealt with the surface issues. You know, I addressed the issue around the feedback. I addressed the issue around the grade. But I still felt like there was something else.
Your sense was, right or wrong, that it had a lot to do with intra-ethnic issues.
I think so. I really do
some
think
feedback,
it did.
some reaction. Why do you think the student stayed on the surface, if she did? You know, because I have a hunch you're right. If she did and she left that out, why would a student stay on the surface? What would the norms be that would make it difficult? Yeah,
one of the things I'm thinking of, and I'm going to compare it after I gave that example of how the pro-life, pro-choice example early on. There was a gentleman in my classroom who is pro-life, and he ended up in his first paper talking quite frankly about how he had an issue and was very forthright in his opinion about that he was pro-life and that almost feeling like I'm siding with you, Professor. But I think he's going to be angry with me because when I emailed him back, he emailed his paper, wanted feedback, and I said, I think you need to be careful. As a social worker, your job is not to impose what your values are on the clients that you work with. And I would guess that he's going to get mad at me because he sees me as an ally and he wants me to take the same stand as he does. So I wonder if that might be some of it.
But no, again, he's raising a very important issue that as an instructor I'd want to work with him on.
Right.
A very important issue at that point. And I'd rather have him angry openly than not openly. So maybe, was that a sense of it? Your sense, I think, was different, Diane. I think your sense was, I'm openly lesbian in the class. I make no bones about it. Students know that. And I treat the class in a certain way, and I act in a certain way, and I look a certain way. All of this is there. And I get a student, you know, sending an email who is a student openly lesbian.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's important because the issue of outing people, you've got to be awfully careful about that. I think that's one of the sensitivities. Yeah. And I get an email from her, and I think it has a lot to do now with all these other issues, but she's angry at me for being me. Right? Something in there.
But
so
what my point was, Larry, was that I'm wondering, because you were saying how you created an atmosphere that was accepting.
I get you now. I understand what Rebecca's saying.
Of saying, you know what, if you have issues with homosexuality, of gay and lesbian issues, then I want you to feel comfortable. And maybe that person was saying, forget that.
Forget that. You should make them feel uncomfortable.
Right.
I missed it. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah.
I missed it. That's a very interesting observation.
Like you were being too kind or something, or too tolerant.
Well, this was a class on social work practice with youth. It was social work practice with youth class. I can see, and I can see, but yes, I think what you're saying can very much happen because I've had gay students in my human diversity class sometimes react loudly in class, you know, and they feel free to do that, but loudly in class in response to another student, and I think their loudness sometimes, the intensity of it might be perhaps making up for my wanting to get everybody to talk. You know what I mean? You know, it's like I'm not coming down on the students who may be anti-gay, so they have to do it double or something. So yeah, that's a really good thought.
And thanks for sticking with it, Rebecca, and not for letting me miss it. I think it was very important you came back to that. That's one possibility. You have another possibility. So there were two at least. What would make it hard for the student to say that directly and have that discussion with you? In other words, if we did a little tuning in, what's that issue about for any student who's different, has experienced a lot of oppression, a lot of homophobia, has experienced attitudes, and now she's at a school of social work, and I even have a lesbian instructor, and she's learning to say those things in the class.
The other part, maybe goes with this, I don't know, but just a piece is that I wonder, you're very, very comfortable, at least it appears to me, you're very, very comfortable about your sexuality and having it be right out there, that that you've worked that to that point. And I wonder if the students might be angry, like, that, I don't know, like maybe she's still struggling about how to be comfortable and with her own identity, and here you are, like, at least appearing to be very okay and not struggling, and is she having trouble with that? And it's just like a total transference kind of issue.
And some of that outspokenness and defensiveness and loudness is because of insecurity too. So if she's not comfortable with it, she may be pushing.
So we've got 3 additional potential areas in hindsight, none of which you raised, because I understand the delicacy of it. But there are 3 additional areas. If the instructor could put those 3 out as well, look, I'm not sure what this is all about. No, not that. Well, how about maybe you don't feel I'm coming down hard enough on people who give views that aren't to us acceptable, or to you acceptable. Maybe you feel I'm too upfront. Whatever those things are, would that at least give a message to the student that if that's an issue she wants to talk about, she can talk about it? Now, if the issue is I'm not comfortable myself in my role and my identity, that's not really your business. That is the business of, in my view, a personal issue. And it's a personal issue which I think we as faculty have some responsibility to give advice to students about where to get help. I'll bet you anything there's a group for people who have those kinds of issues right at the counseling center. Anything. But what is my business is, how does this affect you in the way you relate in my class? How does this affect you in the way you relate to clients and to other social workers? Am I making sense? So I got to be real clear about the purpose of the class and my role as an instructor. Otherwise, I'll get involved in a therapeutic encounter, which is not what I'm not supposed to be doing. Christine, you're welcome.
This kind of thing happens to me quite a bit, but then in order to try to get myself back to where I think I should be, is I have more conversations about what are the difference between personal values and professional values, and know when to keep which thing in mind.
Well, what we talked about today, for example, on the abortion issue, was that the deeper value, which I think all of us share, is that you don't impose your values.
Right.
Now, that's a value I think we can all raise our hands and vote for. That good social work is not trying to impose values on people. Do you share your vision? I think so. I share mine when it's appropriate, when it's relevant, when it's not available. Those are the times when I think my own views are shared. Frank, who's a psychiatrist, Lawrence Frank, wrote about lending a vision, which I thought was a wonderful term. I will lend a vision at times when I think it's helpful, my own views, my own struggles, etc. But I'm lending it. I'm not imposing it. That's a big difference. And it's got to be relevant. And I'm not lending it or sharing it because I've got an agenda and I want to deal with it. It's because it's the student's agenda at that point. So I have a hunch, Diane, if you go back to this example, there are probably areas where it would be very appropriate for an instructor to be helpful to the student and other areas where it wouldn't. And so the question becomes, how do I sort that out? I think that has a lot to do with clarity of role.
My sense was that she was feeling like really vulnerable around something.
Yes.
And she didn't want to share that vulnerability with me. And I've had students come in, like talking about a paper, and then they'll start like tearing up a little, or they'll start looking like really anxious, and I'll stop and I'll say, gee, are you okay? What's happening? And they'll like burst into tears and maybe talk about their impending divorce, things like that. And then of course we'll, direct them to where they need.
But don't lose the answer. I want to reiterate it so that you'll say, I'm glad you said that. An impending divorce can have a powerful impact on school.
Absolutely.
It would be appropriate for me to have a discussion about how you're going to handle all of this stuff going on and handle school. The issue of the divorce does not belong in my bailiwick. So sorting out what is and what isn't, I mean, that's also the answer to processing content. If you step back and ask yourself, how does the process that took place in this class, how does that relate to the purpose of the class? Can I find a connection? It's amazing how often you will find a connection. That actually by addressing what's going on in the class, you're actually working on the class. You're not going off on some other issue. you're right on target. It's just it's coming out in a way that's difficult, to see. Yeah, last comments. Yeah.
I mentioned that there was some kind of a sexual play thing there. You said she was coming on to you?
No. She said.
What did you say?
Diane said.
Acting out at me.
Diane said.
Oh, acting out.
I felt she was treating me like a big bad lesbian mama.
Right. Okay.
That's what you said.
Okay. There's something else.
There might be something to that.
There might be an attraction thing going on there. Maybe you are the authority figure, and maybe students sometimes get attracted to professors. I don't care what the sexuality is, it happens. How do we know that this young lady wasn't interested in getting a personal relationship?
Well,
it doesn't have to be sexual.
There are certain boundaries. I think that's problematic for you to raise. I think that's problematic for you to raise. Student raises it, then you have to deal with it.
I'm talking about the student.
No, but when the student comes on to you, you just raised another whole issue. Can we put that on for another? That's a big one, let me tell you. And would we all agree, right from the start, that it's inappropriate to have that kind of a relationship with a student? It's a violation of our ethics, our code of ethics. Being a teacher is no different than being a social worker. You're a person in a position of authority, and it's inappropriate. Period. Now the question is, how do you handle it? Save it for another session, another juicy session. So we'll raise issues that are difficult. Diane, was this helpful to you? I have a feeling what you just shared with us was helpful to everyone.
Absolutely.
Am I correct?
Yeah.
In their own versions of that. Because everybody has their own version of that. Thank you. And I want to also particularly thank you as a full-time faculty member. A lot of full-time faculty members don't come to sessions like this. They used to. When I was dean, they came for some reason. But
authority thing.
Yeah, but they don't. And I think it takes courage and guts for a full-time faculty member to come in and share examples and participate in the way you've done. And I think that's been really helpful. I admire it. I just want to say so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody last comments before we close down this session? I don't know how you guys do that. I come out exhausted from a group work class. I just about make it in here. And then, the stuff that you're doing, the stuff that you're working on is really very energizing to me. And I'm glad we're going to have a record of it, before the end of the year. Any other comments? If not, I've got stuff for next year: structure issues, small class, big lecture hall, family collaboration. We want you to lecture. Bonnie, the issue of having young students and teaching in a very difficult area. It's what I call high-low. Sometimes you have a class where you have very high students with a lot of experience and age, sometimes very low with very little. I think that's a good issue. So we put that on the agenda. It's about 2 weeks. I don't remember the exact date. We go back to 2-week schedule for the rest of the semester. Good.
Can we, along with that, talk about teaching being younger with older students?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you don't have any kids. Why are you teaching children and adolescents? Class.
Which is the parallel question when
you're
your
in the
clients
field.
say to them, how are you going to help me and you don't have kids?
Yeah.
All right. Younger teacher. I love that one. Thank you for offering that. We can do that one. And older students. And the students tell you that they've worked 20 years. I don't think the gray hair helps in the long run, by the way. If that was the answer, we'd be advising students to go out and get pregnant.
Yeah, right.
No, you got to be able to work with people who don't have kids, who have kids without having kids. You got to find a way to get around that, or take up drug addiction. I mean, there are a lot of things we do, but we have not experienced what our clients have experienced. So the question is, how do we handle it? And I'm going to suggest it's Leslie, right? Is it Leslie? No. Who just?
Michelle. Melissa.
Melissa, sorry, who just raised that. Melissa, I'm going to suggest that is a wonderful example where process gives us an entry into content. And where a student acts out with us the very issues, that's what the parallel process is all about, that they're having in the field. And they're watching us closely. If we handle it well, we'll be modeling what they need to do themselves. Let's talk about the parallel process next time as well. Thank you.